Okay, well, good evening, everybody, and I'm so glad that you're on with us tonight. As I said, this is a really important webinar tonight. This proposed budget reconciliation plan is absolutely horrendous. It is the worst thing that I have ever seen with regard to IRAs in my lifetime. And to me, I really feel like it's just a huge money grab. And so I really, really hope that it's not going to pass. But people are scrambling in case it does pass to figure out what they're going to do. So I want to introduce to you my good friend and IRA expert, Carl Fischer. Carl, I think we might need to unmute you.
Oh, he's here, I think.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, that's right. Okay, very good. So I think many of you know Carl from the previous academies and different webinars we've had. And I have known Carl for many years. What I love about Carl is he was doing notes before he ever started CamaPlan. So he totally gets notes. And that's why I recommend that all my students use CamaPlan. Besides that, Carl, you didn't know I was going to do this, but I need to give you guys a quick plug. I work with IRA trustees all over the country because of doing so many deals with students and everything. And I can tell you hands down, none of them compare with CamaPlan. The big reason is that I think it's the way you have the office organized, Carl, how, you block out phone calls in the morning and your people call the customers. You are able to get deals done way quicker than any of the other trustees. Like there's some trustees that even paying a rush fee, I can't get a deal done in 7 days. And I'm not joking. And Carl, you guys are always on top of things. You have a great team, and it is really a pleasure to be working with investors who have their IRA with you. And the other thing is that if you go with CamaPlan, and Carl, I hope you haven't changed this. I didn't ask you ahead of time, but they don't even start charging you monthly fees until you actually invest in a deal. So you can get your IRA all set up, and then it can be waiting. So it's ready and waiting. When you find a note, you put it in, and that's when your monthly fee starts. Is that still correct, Carl?
That's correct. As long as they open it and get it funded, ready to buy a asset, we don't charge them anything until they buy that asset.
Awesome. And so, and one other thing I want to mention, Matthew's got CamaPlan's website on the screen, but if you do not have an IRA yet with CamaPlan, go to my website, thenotebuyer.com, and scroll down. And if you sign up through my website, Carl will waive the $50 registration fee. So it will save you $50. There you go. And Matthew's got that on the screen. Okay, sorry, I just needed to give that plug because I want you to know that that we have the best here with us tonight. And so, Carl,
thank you very much for that, Don. I do appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's absolutely the truth. So I want to just turn this right over to you, Carl, and maybe you can start out by telling us why this proposed bill could be so horrible for people, the effects that it could have on people's IRA.
Sure, we'll do that. Plus, we've got a few questions that we're having. Yes. And this is the first one that I've ever done in the 20 years Cama's been around. And primarily, I don't do these because they're proposed, and there's so much talk, and everybody's so worried about it. I decided that I need to do it to talk to bigger audiences and get them, talk them down off the ledge. But this is only proposed, okay? And it's, in my opinion, it's not going to be as bad as people think it is, and it's not going to be as good as the other side thinks it's going to be. That's just what I've seen. The House is split. How do you want to say that? The House is split 50-50, but there have been times when they've had a 60% majority, and that would make me even more scared. But today we're doing it because everybody says, well, Congress, the House and the Senate is Democratic, the White House is Democratic, this will go through with flying colors. But as you've seen, that it hadn't gone through. They were supposed to take a vote by October 8th with the ceiling, the debt ceiling being raised, and all they did was postpone that till December. And right now with, I've talked to several people even today with Biden's rating declining. He doesn't have the political wherewithal to get this done. A lot of the attorneys and the accountants are saying. I don't know that. I'm not going to bet on it one way or the other. I'm basically going to look and see what's going to come out here. I do think it is going to be devastating to small businesses. I think there's a lot of other, we're going to talk about IRAs today, but I think there's a lot of other actions that are going to hurt small businesses as well. But when we look at these things and we try to bet on them, and I even look at some of the questions, the process is it goes through the House, it goes through the Senate, they almost always get modified, then we'll go back to the House, they'll modify it again, or accept what's there. And that all takes time. And even if it gets done by the end of the year, they've just made the laws. Okay. Then they have to give those laws to the individuals that write up the regulations. Okay. And I know some of the private sector that they bring in to help this. And when they're writing up those regulations, they're bringing in other professionals from the private sector to help with this. And even if you think the law says one thing, by the time they write the regulations, it'll say something else. So don't worry too much what's there right now. There's one or two things that really are going to make a difference this year, but the rest of it's going to be done over, somewhere between 2 and 10 years for the most part on the stuff that's going to hurt, if that makes sense to everybody. So don't go out, don't jump off the bridge. We're going to find it. We're going to find other strategies, no matter what comes up here, I believe, to help this work. Right now, it's targeted to people with $5 and $10 million, or people that make over 400 to 450, depending if you're single or married. For most of it, some of it does affect other people as an auxiliary or collateral damage, but we'll look at that and figure it out. So the first thing is, don't get, being Chicken Little, the sky is falling. We'll help you. If you're Camel Plan clients, we look at this stuff all the time. We're connected with some of the greatest minds around, and we'll understand how it is, and we'll make recommendations. But this process of the regulations, it'll be 80% done if they work really hard and they get it done by the middle of next year. If they get it out in December, it'll take them at least 6 months, and then there'll be other questions. And they're trying to make this stuff start in 2022 with very little in 2021. So don't worry about it. Your accountants, your professionals will help you get through the process. Does that make sense, Donna?
Yes, it does. Would you like to highlight a couple of the things that people are most concerned about? And we are going to go through the questions. We've got some that people emailed in. And also, if you have questions along the way, feel free to put them in the chat, and Matthew will let me know and we will work those in. Okay, so feel free to do that. But what are some of the things that people are most concerned about?
Okay, so I'll kind of take them in that order, right? Okay. Investing in private placements, private investments, crowdfunding, and different funds out there where you need to be accredited or sophisticated or privately experienced or even educated. They moved it to where you could be, carry a Series 65 or 70 license, and then also be able to have your IRAs invest in that thing. This bill says you cannot do that. So if you wanted to invest, let's say in an apartment building, you didn't have enough to buy it in your IRA, but your IRA wanted to invest in an apartment building, there would be a fund out there that several people would have, and you'd have to be accredited, meaning you had $1 million net worth, or you made over $250,000. And if you went to go invest in this thing, you could invest, a portion of that. But now if you're accredited and you're over 450,000 for sure, you're not going to be allowed to invest with your IRA or your tax advantage plans in here. Now, some people are saying, yeah, but that doesn't count 401ks, right? 401ks are a little bit different because business owners own the 401ks. That we'll go and look at, but the proposed bill does have it out of there right now, but that's just a stroke of the pen to put it in. And that's, under section 138(3)(12). But the same thing in other places in this bill, they're saying, oh, this, if in the $10 million area, you look at all your retirement accounts, and if all of them are over 10 million, then you have to start taking RMDs, and they've put some other rules and regulations on it. The other one was checkbook IRAs.
One sec,
Sure.
can we, before you go on to that, I see where what you just mentioned about the funds. I think that this could affect, or people may think it would affect them. I get a lot of emails from people saying, does this mean that we can't do notes anymore? Well, if you are investing in a fund that holds notes, that could be a problem. Is that right, Carl?
Absolutely. Any fund that you need to be accredited, and there's, I know obviously we have a lot of those people with us, and they're obviously looking at it, and, they get, 50-60% of their money from people with IRAs, and they're very worried about that. Individual notes, you don't have to be an accredited investor to lend money out of your personal money or your IRA. So it will not affect right now. It will not affect individual notes, right? But if you had a fund, Donna, with 1,000 notes in it, and you let people buy into it, and people wanted to buy into it because it gave off a certain percentage interest over the year, that fund would have to be registered with the SEC or have it only accredited investors. And at that point, they couldn't use their IRAs. They'd have to use outside money. Why does the IRS want them to use their bank account money or their outside money? Because if they do that, the 12 or 15 or 20% that you would get them on that fund is now going to be taxed. Right? When it's in the IRA, it's not taxed. Right? And they illegally leaked some information on people's Roth IRAs, Peter Thiel and a few other billionaires, and they had millions to billions to $500 million in their Roth IRAs. And instead of using them as examples of how to do these things and make money for yourself, they're vilifying them for using the laws and getting that at this point in time. And I can say back when Mitt Romney ran for president and they showed his IRAs, we had a lot of calls. I mean, the newspapers kind of said he wasn't, that it wasn't good and that he shouldn't have been able to do that. But trust me, our office got a bunch of calls and they were asking me, how do I get a Mitt Romney IRA? So, we had to explain to them what it was and that they needed to find their own, their own investments.
Absolutely. Well,
so
one of the,
I see people pivoting from those PPMs to buying individual notes. Now, the problem is those individual notes, are not readily available, and the amounts that these people want. You know, a lot of them want to put, you know, 250 or 500,000 into a note. So what they're doing is finding developers and then putting it on, you know, a dozen houses or something like that. So things are going to change. Will that change the price that you can buy notes? Will there be a supply and demand issue that either helps notes or hurts them? We'll see as time goes on.
I think this is going to be a really good time for my students who are out marketing for notes. You should have no problem finding investors. I mean, I've never had problems finding investors, but exactly what Carl said, there's people that are wanting to invest in $300,000 or $400,000 notes, which routinely over the years that you don't see that many people that would buy the larger notes. So that would be something we could get into. The larger notes are definitely out there. The issue in the past has been having an investor who wants to put $400,000 in one note. Well, I think that's going to change. And so we will see a lot more of that. The one thing that I really want to be clear on is if you have followed my strategies as this proposed bill is written, you should not have any problems, because when you invest your IRA money, your IRA is taking title to that note. It is assigned to Camaplan administrator for the benefit of Donna Bauer, whatever your name is. And so that's what we're talking about. And it's really funny because for years people have asked me to start a fund, and I've always said no. One note, one investor. And Carl, that's exactly what is keeping everybody safe right now, you know?
Oh yeah, no, I remember us talking to them, and that's where we were. You know, and we talked about that as a risk that goes out there, and I'll talk a little bit about the checkbook LLCs in a minute on there. But before we get off this topic, I do want to say that if your IRA is already in one of these private placements or one of these funds, you're going to have 2 years to get out of them. But what that does is now you're going to be either selling them to somebody else to buy your interest, and it's got a schedule for it. So when people know that you're going to be forced to sell by the end of 2024, then you're going to, there's a good chance that it's going to lower your value in there. There are people that have note funds, the managers of them are trying to figure out how to do that right now, if there's any way that they can switch it out. But they can always distribute it out of their IRA, pay the taxes on it, and let it go into outside money, and then pay taxes for the rest of their life on the money, right? Remember, the Roth IRA is supposed to not let you pay taxes over your lifetime and others, but now it's your lifetime in 10 years.
Carl, can IRAs still be involved in exchanges?
It depends. Okay. The other thing that's happened here is
For notes, I'm referring
exchanges for notes. Yes. Yeah, they should be able to be.
Would it work if somebody's IRA holds shares in a fund? Could they exchange those shares? Well, that's not a note, it's shares in a fund, but could they exchange that for the real note?
Yes, if they had that and the people said, hey, you're going to go out of the fund, but here's 3 notes, which is equivalent to what you put into it. I think that would be fine, because now they're not in an accredited fund. They basically have a note. That's the first time that was brought up. Good thinking there, Donna. But these are the types of things that, you know, I don't really want to waste time coming up with strategies that haven't passed yet, right? And the chances of this bill, you know, I would bet, you know, $100 to a donut that the chances of this bill passing the way it is won't happen. It may be worse, it may be better, but it hardly ever stays the same.
Okay, well, let's talk about the LLCs. That's another major concern. We've had several questions about those.
Okay, so that's section 138.314, and what it's doing is it's banning ownership of your IRA of more than 10% in anything. Okay, it used to be 50%, but now it's 10%. And not only is it with your IRA, but it's you and your IRA together. So let's say you were buying 10% of a building. You could actually buy it 5% of you and 5% of your IRA, which would be 10%. But a lot of people used to be able to buy 50%. So if you did that and other people had their IRAs in there, you'd have to have at least 11 people and maybe 22 people, because nobody could have more than 10% in any one entity of that. So if you think about your checkbook LLC, you own 100%. Your IRA owns 100% of that checkbook LLC. So by owning 100% of it, they're going to make that not allowable. But the other side of it is who's managing that LLC. And there's been a lot of people and professionals that have allowed individual owners, the IRA owner, the IRA/beneficiary, to be the manager of those LLCs based on the Swanson versus the IRS case back in the almost 20 years ago. The problem with it is it's always been disqualified. Camaplan has always recommended you go to a 401k because that was much safer. And we thought that the laws were clear enough and that if it was ever taken to court again, that they would overrule it. But what they've actually said, that another reason for the checkbook LLCs to be diminished is, at least from the ones that manage it, is you're a disqualified person, therefore you cannot be the manager of the LLC. I think it's always said that, but it went to court and the judge didn't say that. They worked it on some other issue and gave it to Swanson. So just think that you're not going to be able to manage your checkbook LLC yourself. You're going to have somebody else in there if they don't pass the 100% ownership part of it, because theoretically your IRA owned 100% of the LLC, right? Which is now been down to 10%, and they've cleared that up, much clearer than what it was in the old statutes and regulations.
Carl, this might be a good time. Bob has several questions regarding the checkbook LLC. Can I give those to you?
Sure.
He asked if Washington does not eliminate the option to hold a checkbook LLC in an IRA, how do you recommend handling who manages the LLC?
Well, the first thing you're going to have to do is get a non-disqualified person to manage that LLC if they don't do that. And remember, I told you that you were there, and most individuals, I think it's like 50-50 where they've already got a different manager and a non-disqualified person, somebody that's their brother or a other professional that will do that. And by the way, this is the same thing if you have an LLC or a trust or any, or a land trust. A lot of people have done the same thing with their IRAs, owning those. So I would say if they don't kill the checkbook LLC and they pass the prohibited transaction, then you have to get somebody who isn't disqualified. But if they don't kill the checkbook LLC and they don't kill, or get rid of that prohibited person, maybe you can continue the way it's been and continue to manage it. Me personally, I would not do that. The other thing you can do is unwind the LLC, put the assets of the LLC back into the IRA and close the LLC.
That's a good idea. Now, his follow-up question was, how and when do you recommend handling that transition to a non-disqualified person? Are you saying that it would be better to unwind the LLC than to do that?
It depends on what you have. If you have cryptocurrencies, it may not be easy to do that, and some assets will be easier to do than others, because, if you've got tax liens and that's where it is, there'll have to be assignments and changes. So we'll just have to look at it case by case. Each person will call our office. We'll help you talk to your accountant or attorney, and they'll help you, or whoever helps you set up the checkbook LLC. You got to remember now, this is a lot of people's livelihoods, and I don't want to come up with a quick answer today, because we're going to think this out. We're going to put think tanks on it with the people that we know, and there's going to be workarounds. It takes Congress forever to get these things passed and been working, because they've been talking about things like this at least for the last 20 years. I've been watching this stuff happen, and they change a little bit, but it never gets through all the way. I am a little bit more scared because of the bipartisan or the partisan lines that this is going down. But again, that, there's dissension, all over the place in the different parties. So I hope that answered it. But my thing is I would transition to a non-disqualified person as soon as I could, because I've always said this, that you need to have a non-disqualified person, because you don't know how the IRS is going to treat this in the future. They very well couldn't be the friendly, and they might give you 2 years to fix this, or they could have just come out with a ruling and said, hey, all of these are no good and your IRA is dissolved and now you owe taxes for the back years. But somewhere along the way, we got a quote kinder, gentler IRS. I don't know if that's going to be the case, because they're going to double the size of the auditors. And the last thing I want to see people do is not have their paperwork in order. Look at your paperwork, start paying attention to it. The statute of limitations is also moving from 3 to 6 years. So if you haven't filed tax returns, now's a good time to start filing tax returns.
So regardless of whether this bill passes or not, go ahead and make the transition to a non-disqualified person.
That's what I would say. That's one of the things that I would do, because and I've always recommended that to, if I could recommend something, I'd recommend that to our clients, or go get it, or turn it into a 401k, right? Because the rules seem to be a little different with 401ks and always have been.
And I liked what you said. It's important to understand that we are not in any way, shape, or form giving legal advice or accounting advice tonight. Every person's situation is different. We're giving you some information, and then you need to take this and go to your own accountant, to your own attorney, and talk to them and figure out what works best for you. You don't want to just jump on something that's you pick up off of any webinar and go do it, because your situation could be totally different, and there might be a reason why you would do something else.
Right.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, a takeaway from that is go talk to them now and just say, hey, what do you think about these things? And what should I tell my representative to do or not to do? How's it going to affect me? So I do think there is another takeaway, because there's possibly a chance we can change some people's minds and say, hey, don't limit my choices in investments. Let me control my own investments. Let me invest in what I know and understand, and with the people I trust and know.
I agree wholeheartedly. Bob has one last question, and then we'll move on. Is there any reason an IRA could not make a distribution of an ownership in an LLC to remove the LLC from the IRA rather than liquidate?
Okay, thinking about, all right, so your IRA owns this LLC, and let's say you're over 59 and a half. If you're under 59 and a half, you'll pay a 10% penalty to distribute. But if you're over 59 and a half and you say, hey, my LLC has, some cryptocurrency in it, some real estate and some notes and some private placements in it, I want to distribute it. We would get a valuation of each one of those assets in there, what's in the LLC bank account, and then we would distribute it. If it was a Roth IRA, there wouldn't be taxes on it. If it was a traditional IRA or, pre-tax IRA, then you would pay taxes, and it'd be just like any other distribution. And then obviously, once it was distributed from your IRA, all future earnings would not be tax advantage. So anything it made that year would get taxed.
Okay.
Not my optimum choice of ways to get out of it, but yes, you can do that. And, you know, hopefully we can come up with 6 or 7 better ways once it passes.
Absolutely. That's all for the questions regarding the checkbook LLC. What other things are people really concerned about? Anything in particular, or we have lots of other questions.
You know, and well, let me bring up another point on this, because some people that are buying real estate would have their IRA go into an LLC, and then that LLC would buy the real estate, and they would have that LLC there as a asset protection device feature, and that won't be allowed anymore either. Same thing with the land trust. So if you're going to buy real estate in the future, you're most likely going to have to buy it directly out of your IRA, which a lot of our people do. And the way we've always said protect from asset protection is to open up a separate IRA for each piece of real estate or each piece of asset that has a liability.
So similar to that, like we use a personal property trust to hold notes and have the IRA own a beneficial interest in a personal property trust. Would that no longer be allowed?
Done. That's an entity that the IRA owns. 100% of it's gone. Personal property trust isn't going to work.
Okay, good to know.
Yep.
So for my students and investors who have used their IRA to own a beneficial interest in a personal property trust, what should they do?
Well, and I should have said it depends. If they have less than 10% ownership in that personal property trust, then they'll be fine. If it's over 10%, which most people have, they just use it for the anonymity portion of it. They're going to have to move those notes back into the IRA, and most people use a personal property trust for anonymity. And at CamaPlan, our way to allow people to still have that is to move the asset to CamaPlan for benefit of account number 12345, and we don't ever give out names for that
That's a
information.
great idea. That's a great idea. I have a lot of my students who there might be, like the question we had earlier, there might be 3 different IRAs that are sharing in the ownership of a note, and they use a trust to do that. So what we could do is just assign, have the trust assign the interest to those 3 IRAs directly, and that would correct it.
Correct.
So that should not be a problem. So that is one alternative you have if that should be an issue for you. Mark,
and Donna, we'll find other ways around it. We'll have options for people to look at this once it finally gets passed. Otherwise, we're just spinning our wheels coming up with this. But you've got some great ideas there. I'm thinking of bringing you in on how we can fix this.
Well, I'll help with the notes. I don't know about anything else.
Yeah.
But Alan was asking what things are open, what options are available to us. So
right.
We'll wait and see as things come down the line. I think the important thing is, what do we need to do now, or what should we be thinking about? Mark wants to know, since 401ks are not explicitly cited in the 138, 312, and 314, are solo 401ks exempt for the moment, or are they somehow implied?
Well, that's a great question. And nonetheless, it's coming from Mark, who I would expect that did this and probably read the whole bill.
He did. He did.
At least the 800 pages on the IRAs. Right now, 401ks aren't in there, but Mark also knows that I told him to get away from the checkbook LLCs, years ago, and go with the 401k. And he actually had a business that it was easy enough for him to do that. Again, this is proposed, and I told you that it goes to the House and it gets changed back and forth, and I don't know where it will end up. But right now, for the PPM section that we talked about, the 401ks are okay for that, but with the stroke of a pen, they'll put it in. And if you go back down to one of the other areas where if your IRA gets too big, say $10 million, or let's say it goes to $11 million, right now you're going to have to pay you're going to have to distribute 500,000 that year because the amount over your 10 million is $1 million. So when they're looking at that one, they're combining IRAs, 401ks, defined benefit plans, et cetera. Or I think maybe defined benefit plans aren't in there, but the 401ks definitely are. So is that an oversight by the people writing the bill, or was it specific? And when you talk to these lawmakers, they're not even writing these bills. They have their aides and assistants doing this stuff that, I don't even know that they've read it. I would vote for Mark to go to Washington.
Yeah.
At least he would read the bill before they vote on it. But they have everybody there. So in some of these sections, yes, the 401k is left out, but is it an oversight? I know one thing, it's definitely very little ink and very little time to add it into any of these.
Mark, you got to unmute and tell us what it was like to read that bill.
It's actually a lot easier. Hopefully you can hear me. It's a lot easier to read. The bill is 800 something pages. It starts, if I remember correctly, 138.312 starts on page 689. And I actually downloaded it to my phone, and it's actually quite easy to read. The parts that are not easy to read is when they talk about subsection 4D of something else, but the language is actually, as you and Carl know, I read everything. So I had to see it for myself. And it was incredibly simple to read, except for the references to other parts of the bill.
Thank you.
I recommend everybody read it.
Yeah. Well, maybe after they pass it, then read it, and then we'll really know what we have to pay attention to.
There you go.
That's true.
And for those of you who don't know Mark, he has part-time investors. He is a very trusted and admired teacher of how to invest in real estate part-time. And so I'm glad to have you on, Mark. I always appreciate
Thank you so
that.
much.
Okay, so going back to our questions, Stephen asks, Mark, where can we download a copy of the bill? I know you sent me a link, I believe.
Oh, actually, that's a good question. The way that I found it, I simply Googled 138.312, 138.314 Biden tax proposal, and I got it.
Okay.
So I don't remember exactly, but you know what? If I find the link, I'll post it in the chat.
Okay, that would be great. That would be great. And then, so Stephen has a question. When talking, this is for Carl, when talking about less than 10% ownership, is that talking about actual ownership and profit and loss ownership? So what he's saying is I can give 91% to a non-disqualified party, however, still control and benefit from 100% of the profit and loss. Can you split out the profit and loss from the ownership?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm thinking about that question there, but who's a non-disqualified 91%? So now you have 9% in there. Another part of the bill is talking about officers. Are you running it? Are you involved in it? If you are, then it's disqualified. So there's no officers allowed in it. But if you said they're non-voting, generally there's a pro rata share that's involved there. You're going to have to come up with a pretty good story on why 91% of this is done that way. There's what's called the indirect rule. And if there's anything that you do indirectly that you could have done directly to evade IRS rule, then, it's deemed to be, the IRA is deemed to be distributed. So I would answer no right off the top, but I'll definitely look at that and see. again, I can't come up with all the solutions that are there. And I'm not an attorney and I'm not, but it's a good thought for it.
I think anytime when you have those gray areas, it seems like they're usually going to side against you. I will tell you, when the checkbook LLCs became popular, all the attorneys that I spoke to said, stay away from them. And now look, it's coming back to bite people. I just think I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know if it's biting them. I think that the IRS actually is taking a very nice approach to this and giving you, a couple years to unwind it if they actually go this way. The other side of it is they are going to start auditing them, and we've been having to give information to the IRS for the past 5 years, identifying hard to value assets and checkbook LLCs and things like that. And they have a specific code for it. And you'll see it on your 5498s and your 1099s if you've distributed any of those. So I think they're being quite generous at this point, telling you, hey, this is what it is. We're clearing up this rule. You got, 2 years to fix it.
So I was going to ask something, and I forgot what it was about the checkbook IRA. Oh well, let it go.
Well, I'll talk about Roth conversions are going to be limited. Okay, so let's talk about that, because this is one area that we do have a question on that came here, and it said,
yes.
Can I still do my backdoor Roth IRA? You can still do it today, but if this law passes, the backdoor conversions are going to be closed the end of this year. And a lot of people don't understand what a backdoor IRA is, and they think just traditional IRA conversions will, go away. That's not the case. A backdoor IRA actually came about in 2010. And what happened in 2010 is they changed the law to eliminate how much you can convert to a Roth IRA, how much money. It used to be if you made over 100,000, you could not convert anything to an IRA from 1998 to 2010. In 2010, they said, all right, it doesn't matter how much you make, you can convert to a Roth IRA. And the reason they did that is they wanted a bunch of people to convert to the Roth IRA. Once they converted to the Roth IRA, they'd be paying taxes and they would get more money in. But what they did is they gave people basically free money for the rest of their life once they converted in 2010. And they were supposed to put the limitation back in 2 years, but they never did. So now what they're talking about is putting that limitation back in. But the other side that really hurt it was people that were making over $200,000 were not allowed to make a contribution to a Roth, nor were they allowed to make a contribution to a traditional IRA. So what they did was they made what they called after-tax contributions to a traditional IRA, because you pay the tax on it today, and then it would be in your traditional IRA, and your traditional IRA, you'd be paying the taxes on that when you turn 59 and a half or 72, whenever you took out the distributions. So what the wealthy people did is they put as much money in that after-tax amount, put it in a traditional account, and then converted that to a Roth. And then they got even better when they were doing that in the 401ks, right? They were putting 28,000 in, and and then getting up to 60,000. 28,000 they could still make it into a Roth, but in the 60,000 they would then convert that and pay the taxes on it at that point. So there was a lot of what they call backdoor Roth conversion. So if you have any after-tax money that you want to convert to the Roth, you need to talk to your accountant, because it's not a straightforward after-tax conversion unless you don't have any traditional money. If you have any traditional IRA, it has to be a pro rata share. Talk to your accountant on that. But this is the year that you want to do that if you do have after-tax money that's out there.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah, but the
John?
other, okay, go ahead. The other thing is you will still be able to do Roth conversions as long as you make under $450,000, and you'll be able to do that for the next 10 years.
Very good.
Okay.
John is wanting to know, you mentioned turning your IRA into a 401k. How do you do that?
Well, if it's a traditional IRA, you can. If it's a Roth IRA, you cannot. But when I say turn it into it, I would say, depending on how these rules come out, open up a 401k. How do you open up a 401k? You have to have a business, you have to have a plan, and you have to be able to contribute every year. And you need an administrator or your accountant to help you come up with what your contributions, et cetera, are. Right, there's salary deferrals, there's company matches, there's safe harbor adjustments that can be put in there. So I love 401ks. If you have a business, I think you should use them. The main thing I like about it is you can go ahead and put, if you're under 50, you can put in 18,000 something this year and 26 something if you're over 50. So it's a way to put more money into the accounts, and you can still convert depending on how much money you make. And all of this is targeted to people, or I should say not all of it, but the majority of this is targeted over single people that make over 400 to married couples who make over 450.
So is it fair to say then with a traditional IRA, you can roll that into a 401k, but not with a Roth?
Correct. Roth, but if you have a Roth 401k, you can still move that to a Roth IRA. It's like a one-way street.
Right. Okay.
And I'm not sure why it's that way, but it's been that way right from the beginning.
Okay. We have some very basic questions, and then we have some more sophisticated questions. So let's go down to some basics. Someone asked, can you discuss how a self-directed IRA works and what are the fees? And then somebody else asked, how much is needed to get started?
Okay. The first one of the questions that came in here, somebody said I have a self-directed IRA at TD Ameritrade. Okay. And what I want to do is I want to tell you that Camaplan has truly self-directed IRAs. We don't sell any investments. We don't endorse any investments. We don't recommend any investments. We don't find any investments for you. When you have a self-directed IRA at TD Ameritrade, you can self-direct in anything that they sell. You can't buy real estate. You can't buy a note from Donna in most instances. You can't buy gold. You can buy ETFs for gold and things like that. But so a self-directed IRA is with Camaplan is different in that you have the control, you have the knowledge, you find the investments, and all we do is the paperwork to keep you legal with the IRS. We fill out the forms and the reporting to the IRS as required, and you find the assets. Obviously, all the risk is on you for the assets that you find. Once you put your money here, we're going to keep it in a guaranteed FDIC type of account so that you don't lose it there. But once you put it in that investment, that's all on you, win or lose. But most people that are with us trust their instincts and they invest in things they know and understand. And you can go talk to Mark Halpern. He's always happy to tell you how he did things with his IRAs and 401ks. But he does a lot of due diligence. And this isn't something that as easy as, reading stocks in the newspaper or, on the ticker tape or on your phone. You have to do due diligence, and but I think your returns are better for it. So that's kind of what a self-directed IRA, it lets you invest in anything that you want for the most part. With what they're limiting us, they're now trying to limit us in this plan. Before, all they couldn't invest in were life insurance and collectibles pretty much. Now they're adding more things and cutting down on individuals' rights and diversity. So that's what it is. Now, the fees are inexpensive when you consider what the taxes are in most cases. Our fees are $50 to open up an account. Depends on how much money you have, but your annual fee could be as little as $150, or it could be $275 based on the asset. We have two ways of doing fees. One is based on the value of your account. The other one is based on the number of assets in your account. As an example, if you buy $1 million horse farm, you're going to pay based on the asset, which is $275 a year. If you buy $100,000 house, you're going to pay $275 a year for the asset. If you buy a $40,000 house, or let's say you buy two $20,000 houses, you would pay $150 or $200 for those two houses, where based on the value of your account, up to the 270 up to the versus the 275 times 2, which is 5,500. Our fee sheet is all on one page. Look at it. My sister and I started this company. We're investors. As Donna said, I was doing notes in real estate before I even had the company. I found out about it. I saw how it boosted my income, got me away from taxes. Some smart guy said, forget about what you're making on your salary, worry about your investments, and because that's where you can save more money. And if you can do it without taxes, then you're going to grow asymptotically, or much more quickly than growing your salary.
Carl, somebody's asking, what is the monthly fee?
We don't charge a monthly fee. We charge it once a year. And like I said, if you have $1 million property, it's going to be $275 for the year, and you'll pay that in January. And I think we're the only company out there that doesn't charge you any fee till you buy something, like we talked about. And we also are the only company, I believe, that prorate it. So if you buy an asset in the middle of the year, you're only going to be paying for half a year there. I mean, we set this up for ourselves, okay? We've been buying it. My mom and dad were in real estate, and their mom and dads were in real estate. So we said, this is how we would like it to be done. And quite frankly, if somebody buys $1 million property or $100,000 property, I mean, it doesn't make any difference to us with the processing. It's 2 zeros, right? How much is the ink on 2 extra zeros on the end of it, right? So for us to process it, it's basically the same amount.
Okay, so one of the big things that I would like for people to realize, if you're not already using an IRA, is that everything that I teach about notes can all be done in your self-directed IRA. And so if you do not need that money to live off of right now, you want your IRA to be the investor with the note. The IRA can flip a note, the IRA can buy a note and hold it. When it pays off, your IRA collects the discount and it gets an amazing rate of return. And I want to be clear that you're not taking money out of the IRA to invest in a note. It is your IRA that actually holds title to the note. And so obviously, if you're trying to build up your retirement, you want to do those in your IRA where you get the tax benefits and everything. So that's why it's so important to use an IRA in conjunction with the notes. One thing I do want to mention also, while we're talking about that your IRA would hold title to the note, someone asked about one note, one investor. Well, what if you have 3 different IRAs that are all partnering on a note, or maybe you and your friend each own 50% undivided interest. Even so, as long as you know the people that you're partnering up with, that's not a problem. What I was referring to is if you invest in shares in a fund, you do not hold title to the security. You are at the mercy of the fund manager. And I know some great fund managers, but if all hell breaks loose, they can really be scrambling. And like if the market crashes and they're trying to divvy out profits to everybody, you don't have control over that. Whereas, let's say if you and your friend, each of your IRAs held part interest in a mortgage, in a note mortgage, and if that borrower defaulted, then you and your friend, your IRAs, would foreclose on that property, and you can get the house back, you can sell it, and your IRAs would recoup the money. And that's what I mean, one note, one investor. I don't mean that you can't partner up with other individuals to buy a note. I mean that you don't want to pool money and own part of a fund unless you're willing to take that risk and you know who the fund manager is and all of that.
Well,
So
but the other side of that is with this bill passes, they're not going to be able to do those funds because those funds need to register with the SEC, or they need to notify the SEC that they have a fund and maybe not go through the whole registration. But most of those funds are going to require you to be accredited. And if you're accredited and make over $450,000, then you're going to be prohibited. If you're accredited and you make under 400 or 450,000, that's a questionable area now. And when you read the bill, you don't know it, but that's what the people that write the regulations after the bill is passed is going to make clear, right? And that's like one of the questions that'll get asked by the accountants and the tax attorneys. But the other side, Donna, is I don't want to give a blanket endorsement to having 2 or 3 people on a note, because I have talked to some state SEC attorneys, and they think once you put more than one person on that note, that it becomes a security. But I've also talked to other people that say, hey, it's not a security because it's exempt because of the people know it, et cetera. So you do kind of have to watch a little bit of that. But the 3 IRAs, if you've got, 2 with us and 1 with another custodian, but you're you're the owner of all of them. We did ask that question, and that is just one person.
I absolutely agree with what you said as far as the SEC is really coming down on multiple people if they're pooling money to buy a note. I'm not an attorney and I'm not 100% sure of this, but I believe one of the things that differentiates that is if you say that your IRA holds a 50% undivided interest. I think that might take care of that. I'm not sure.
And it's tenants in common versus, survivorship and things like that. So all of that stuff matters. And I would say, let's wait for the bill to pass. Let's see where it is. But part of this problem is the SEC is the one who says you have to be accredited to get into these investments. And to be accredited, you have to have made so much money or have gone and gotten certain licenses. So they could have just changed that and said, hey, everybody can invest in these things. But they said, oh, it's, this is a deal for the rich, and the unwealthy aren't allowed to invest in this. But the SEC said, well, the unwealthy aren't sophisticated enough to do this, and this is a very risky investment. So, the government's talking out of both sides of their mouth over here. If you're in a more risky investment, shouldn't you make a higher interest rate? But either way, the government's there and we got to live by their rules. Let's see what passes and where we go with it.
I agree. And we do have several questions about can 2 or more people own the notes? Can 2 different IRAs hold a note? And I agree. I think we just need to wait and see, what comes up with that. In the past, we've done it without any problem at all.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we'll wait to see.
And there are some exemptions too in different states, and the feds, I haven't seen anybody do anything with them.
I agree. I absolutely agree. I'll tell you, Carl, one of the things that really upset me about this proposed bill was them giving, and Mark, you can speak to this since you read it too. But my understanding is that they're giving the IRS carte blanche just to make decisions on the fly as they go. Is that true?
Go ahead, Mark. I'll let you start off on that one. I want to hear your answer.
I'm actually going to just a disclaimer. I'm a chemist and don't take tax and legal advice from a chemist. My reading comprehension skills in the English language are good enough that I can read the bill, but to interpret it, Carl, I'll let you put yourself on the block for that. I won't.
Okay. Well, here's where they're going with it as I can see it. The IRS is hiring, doubling the number of auditors. Okay, and their budget has been increased immensely, and they're getting AI, artificial intelligence, to review the returns. And people are saying, well, what if I open up 10 IRAs? Will they ever catch that? I have less than $1 million in all of them, therefore I'm not over 10 million if I open up 11 of them. The answer is they're going to tie everything to your social security number, whether you have them with us or with 10 other custodians out there. And they're going to look at that the same way your 401k and any of your other entities are tied to your tax return. If they're tied to your social security number, even if they can't catch it now, maybe they have the same people that did the Obamacare website doing their AI, so it'll take them 5 or 10 years to get it there. But they are, that they are going on the path. Now, they've pulled back from just giving the IRS access to your bank accounts. At one point, Biden had that in the law that the banks and the IRS would have interchangeability for it. Now they've pushed that back to the $600 transaction. So any $600 transaction you make, the bank's going to report on, and Camaplan's going to have to report on. They tried doing that a couple of years ago, and it got shot down because how much paper that requires, and small banks would have to do it. It would increase our fees here if we had to do that type of reporting. And it's just, they're spending, $3.5 trillion, Congress is, but they want to check us for $600 every $600. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't think that will pass, but I don't know. But the fact that the IRS auditors, it seems to be a foregone conclusion, they're going to get more. Are they going to get twice as many? I don't know. So I do expect to have more audits. I expect that to come out because, the other problem they have is, where's the labor coming from? There seems to be a labor shortage in the country. So by the time they get to this stuff, it's going to be 2 or 3 years down the road, at least. So they moved the statute of limitation back 6 years. But if the AI is there, then you're there. So something to take away from today and put in your notes. Some people have been sloppy about how things have been written in the past. So what I would like for people to do is make sure you're cross your T's and dot your I's. Somebody said, do you need an attorney? You don't need an attorney, but guess what? If you have an attorney draw it up, he's then liable, and you can say, look, judge, what do you want? I gave it to the attorney, and you can go against his errors and omissions. And obviously they're going to up their fees for that work, and it's going to cost you a little bit more. But, that might be the way you can go, because I don't know if we're going to have a kindler, gentler IRS. If they really get $3.5 trillion through, how much money do they have to collect? They got to collect a lot to pay for that. I mean, Biden says it's not going to cost you anything, but let's face it, just because you're taking it from us, it's still going to cost $3.5 trillion. right? It's not $3.5 trillion you can go buy a boat with. It's money that's being spent. So make sure your paperwork is as impeccable as possible going forward.
Very good. Rick has a specific question here. It's my understanding that all private placements with accredited investors have to be distributed, that there's no grandfathering. This seems like a logistical nightmare to implement. How would all the private placement sponsors do this going back 20+ years? If the accredited investor invested in a private placement as an LLC member, would this investment have to be distributed?
If it's over 10%, yes, it would. If it's an accredited investor and the person makes over $450,000, it definitely would have to be distributed. And you're going to ask, it's going to have to be out of the account. Here we are trying to put the cart before the horse again, but a couple of ways to do it is you can distribute it from your IRA and then own it yourself. All right. The second thing is you might be able to sell it to another investor. 3, the fund manager may allow people to buy out. They may talk to their attorneys and figure a way to get out of there. Donna, you had another one. If it was a note fund, maybe you disperse the fund, or if it was a real estate fund, maybe you could pass out the real estate and each person would have it. Or maybe there's a way that an attorney can come up and make it so that it's not an accredited, or you don't need to be an accredited investor to be in this fund. So
if I were a fund manager, I would try to find another pool of notes, and I would help all of my shareholders to exchange from shares in my fund to an individual note. Now, I'm not 100% sure you can exchange shares because it has to be like kind, and shares in a fund would not be a note, but I would work out something like that, or even
but it could be a sale, Donna.
Yeah, that's what I was
Right.
going to say.
I mean, it could be,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, we could do that sale instead of the cash coming in. You know, our asset goes from, you know, shares in this LLC to 4 notes over here, right? Or shares
Right.
here to 1 note here,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So
I
mean,
think that could be done.
again, let's wait and see what's out there, because we've come up with several ideas now. We'll be able to bat this around. People will be looking at it. As long as our gray matter is working, we will beat the government with finances. I feel certain. I've just seen it through my whole life. They make one rule and we change it. I don't know if you remember, but you used to be able to deduct interest from credit cards, you know, back in the 70s or 80s. But once that went away, that, you know, they said, well, we don't want people to be able to deduct the interest, and we're going to make this much money. But what happened is the banks made home equity lines of credit. So everybody got a home equity line of credit on their house, paid off their credit cards, and the bill did not talk about, you know, your primary residence. You know, you got a deduction for the interest in that. So there's all those things that several people are working for. And, you know, not that we're the smartest, but we can definitely follow some of the smartest people that are out there if we don't come up with the ideas. So
absolutely.
I mean, this could be devastating. You know, people are going, well, aren't you nervous about your business, et cetera? This could be very devastating to Camel Plan and self-directed IRA companies, because, you know, these fund managers love having us because nobody else does that stuff for them. And some of these funds use 50, 60, 70% of IRA money. I mean, I'm not going to say that it doesn't, you know, I wish it wasn't there and that my anxiety hasn't gone up any, but I'm just going to stay the course, see what gets passed. And I feel certain, I come from a long line of survivors, I feel certain that we're going to find out ways around this.
I absolutely agree.
Donna, can I add something just for a moment?
Sure.
One of the questions that was asked about when people have to divest out of the PPMs. So I actually reached out to several of my self-directed 401k, which by the way is a CAMA plan, the CAMA Roth as well, and everything I learned about knows this from you, Donna. So I actually reached out to several of the PPMs. I think my Roth owns 5 different PPMs, apartment complexes, and other types of things, LLCs. And so I actually reached out to them, and I said, is it possible to simply retitle from my the ownership of the shares in the LLC? These PPMs are typically LLCs, from my 401k to my personal name. Can you guys handle that? And the answer was yes, they can. And in some of the operating agreements, actually, in one of them, which I was just looking at, it was in section 9.1b, it actually said that they can do that. So he actually sent me the portion of that. Now, if I do distribute, as Carl said earlier, if I distribute it from my 401k to myself, then yes, I'll have to issue a 1099-R or issue. I have a do your own self-directed 401k with CAMA plan. So I'm the trustee and administrator, so that I would have to do a 1099-R. Now, because I'm over 59 and a half, it's in my Roth. There are actually no tax ramifications by doing that distribution, except as Carl said earlier, going forward, any profit that I'd be making going forward, those would be taxed. But everything that I did before then would be okay. So,
and by the way, that's what the government wants you to do.
Okay.
Right. That's what they want you to do, because that's going to now give them, right. But a lot of our clients are saying, well, I don't want to give up the tax-free interest. I'm going to pivot, and I'm going to look for other investments, like Donna said. But how much is enough, and how much do you really want to pay, and what lengths, and how hard is it going to be to switch and figure out where you're going to be. So.
Yeah, I personally think that this, if this gets passed the way that it is, I know Donna wants for the good of all of us, but quite frankly, I expect a flood of inquiries into Donna Bauer's course, because this is going to be the place where people are going to be putting money. And especially, Donna, like you said before, 300,000, 400,000, before it was hard to find. I even know 200,000. We talked about this 2 years ago. I had some money, and you said, oh, well, I have these other notes for you. But I think there's going to be a lot of money that's going to be put into notes. And I think anybody who's not taking Donna Bauer's course, you better take, if you haven't taken it until now for reasons that I would not understand, but I'll forgive you, you should really take Donna's course, and then have your plan with CAMA plan. And nobody asked me to say anything. Actually, I didn't even know I was going to get to unmute.
I'll send you a check tomorrow. Just kidding.
All right, mute him now. He said enough. Thanks, Mark.
Yes, thank you, Mark. Okay, so there's a couple other questions here. Shelley's still asking about what's the monthly fee you were talking about in the beginning. Do you remember talking about a monthly fee?
I don't. If I said monthly, I may have misspoke and said annual.
Okay.
I mean, we've got a fee sheet. Go to our website, and you'll be able to see it under forms, and it's all on one sheet, and we talk about every single fee that's there.
And she also asked about moving her IRA from a different custodian to CAMA plan. How would she go about that?
You basically will fill out a transfer request form, and you can transfer cash, or you can transfer assets in kind if they're true, if they're real estate notes, et cetera. If they're stocks and bonds, we would say leave them where they are and just bring over the money you want to do alternatives with. What
about her checkbook LLC?
If you're doing a checkbook LLC, yeah, you can transfer them to us, and if you're still if you're the head of it, that's fine. But, you want to pay attention to this stuff, and we'll, the assets will be in the name of the checkbook IRA, depends on how that is. And maybe we've got to do some revesting, but in a lot of cases we don't. Tell her to call me and, or email me, and I'll get someone to talk to her, or call in and set up an appointment.
That would be a good idea. She could call the office and set up an appointment.
Yep, and we'll give her the fee sheet and tell her exactly what it is. And in her case, it's going to be $275 a year if all she has is a checkbook LLC, and it's over $40,000 in value. If it's under $40,000 in value, it'll be somewhere between $150 and $275, depending on what the value is.
Okay. What about JV properties in her partner's name?
What about them? I
Or
mean,
is she
is it
on
in the,
transfer those?
is it in the IRA?
It sounds like her IRA has a JV interest in a property with, I'm not absolutely sure.
Okay,
That's
if she
Yeah,
has
she
a,
said that's right. Yep, that's right.
okay. If you have a JV interest in your checkbook LLC, and this law gets passed, what you're probably going to do is unwind the checkbook LLC, and put that JV into the IRA itself, and then the IRA is going to own that JV. And then there's going to be a question: is that JV, what type of entity is it, and what kind of ownership it is? And I don't want to answer that till the law really gets passed and we see exactly how it's written.
okay. Vicky would like to know, what is the limit on how many notes the IRA can flip in a year?
Well, if you're flipping notes, you're supposed to hold assets as investments. If you're flipping notes, then they might call you in the flipping note business. And if you're in the flipping note business, you're going to have to pay unrelated business income tax, but you can flip as many notes as you want in your IRA.
So a good plan is to flip your first note in your IRA, and you can flip one. They're not in a business if you just flip one. And then you take that profit and then you invest that money in another note, and your IRA holds it.
Right. And the other one is, your intent, if your intent is to hold it, I've seen people, especially back in 2005 and 6, where they bought a house and, 6 months later, they can make 60,000 on it. So they sold that house. Their intent was to keep it and rent it, but they said, why not take 60,000 in 6 months on a, $300,000 house?
Exactly. Okay, let's see. Here's one from Alan. What do you feel is an acceptable level of service for response time on a purchase request, or if questions, to ask for any missing details?
Well, I'm gonna have to fess up here, but Alan is with Camaplan, and there was some miscommunication along the way, emails that were missed. But what I think is the proper amount of time, 24 to 48 hours. 99% of our stuff gets out within 48 hours. And I'll tell any of our clients that if you send something to us, listen to me and write this down. If you send something to us and you don't hear that something back from us, either your money's going out, your deal is approved, or hey, we still need some information. If you don't have one of those things within 48 hours, you need to call us because something broke down. Now people say, well, what can break down? Well, emails can get hung up, but the ones I really hate are the people that fax things to us, and when they fax it, they put the writing the wrong way. So we get 3 blank pages. And then they say, well, if you got 3 blank pages, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you call me and tell me that? Well, if I had your name and number, I'd be able to do that. So again, I think we're one of the fastest in the industry, and most knowledgeable. So your stuff goes out. If you don't have something within 24 or 48 hours, pick up the phone, talk to us, and say, I haven't heard back from you within 48 hours. Something's messed up. Carl said to call you.
I am very, very serious. I mean, I've worked with so many IRA companies, custodians all over the country, and none of them compare with your service, Carl. Your people do get right back. And that's not the case with many of the other ones. And that is why I moved my IRA to Camaplan. I moved it because of you and because the fees were less. And then I discovered, oh my gosh, why didn't I move it a whole lot sooner?
Yeah.
So
Thanks, Donna. And
your service is exceptional.
We do 48,000 transactions a year.
That's a lot of transactions.
Yeah.
A lot of transactions. Well, you can be proud of it. And I can attest that you do respond. Your response is great. I have a question. Could you talk about investing in cryptocurrency in your IRA?
I can. I tried to set up our company to do cryptocurrencies 8 years ago. I had several experts in the industry come talk. I set up things for it. And quite frankly, I couldn't understand it. I think I even invited Mark to go to a couple of those events. And I think he had the same thing. I don't think he got into the cryptocurrencies. But what they've done now, and there was a lot of hoops to jump through, and you had to watch the passcodes, and they would only give us one account, and we'd have to put everybody's account in this one wallet. And I just, it seemed too risky to me. But now what they've got is they've got brokerage houses out there like Coinbase, Gemini, and Asilex, and we've worked with one of them. And now what you're able to do is your IRA is able to open up an account with these, what I'm going to call cryptocurrency brokerage houses. And then your IRA puts your money in there. We allow you to have access into it to trade it, but you can't add money to the cryptocurrency. You have to come through the IRA, and you can't, take a distribution, but you can buy and sell whatever you want. And we're just in the process of doing our first deals on those right now.
So if we want to do that, should we just call your office?
Yep. Call the office and you can talk to Will, who's heading that up.
Will, okay.
Yep.
Will do.
I'm not an expert in this, but just a note. I think that if you try to set up an account and you're not some multi-billion-dollar thing, even a small LLC or something like that, if you have an entity, I think it takes a long time. It takes weeks, maybe even months, because you're deprioritized. That's not from personal experience, but from reliable colleague sources. Yeah. And there's also issues with UBIT and other things that might be coming out about it, depending on how often you do. And it's doable, just not simple. And I'm not gonna make any more comments because I'm not an expert.
Yep. And I think that, that was one of the things, and I think the system we've set up is going to be a simplification of that, Mark. That's the reason we didn't get into it before, but we'll find out here very shortly and see exactly how it's going to work. But I still don't understand it. And obviously all the risk is on the investor. But a lot of people are doing it. I've had questions from some people, is the government going to outlaw cryptocurrencies? Are they going to come up with their own, federal cryptocurrency? I have no idea on that stuff. It's hard for me to understand. I guess the blockchain technology is here to stay, but in my mind, for those that have been around, this reminds me a lot of the .com days. But a lot of people have asked us for it, so we're I've basically bitten the bullet and said, all right, let's figure out a way to do it.
Okay. I do want to comment that there's a lot of links and information in the chat. You might want to scroll through there real quick. And a big thing that I would like you to take away from here is please contact your representatives. Tell them to not to let this go through. Shelley posted handsoffmyira.com. I believe that is John Heyer's website. He has some great letters that you can use, some templates. I think Mark mentioned that, you can use to write letters, but make your voices heard and tell them to keep their hands off your IRA, and let them know. I mean, this could be devastating. I appreciate what you said, Carl, about that, things do get worked out, but there are people who could really be hurt by it. And I just think it's important to make your voice heard.
Yeah, let's face it, they're taking choices away from us.
Yes.
Right. I mean, I've never liked that when somebody else limits my choices. I mean, I didn't like it when the SEC said when I was younger that I was too stupid to invest in these investments. I said, well, I got to figure out how to get involved in them. So yeah, I mean, I just feel that they shouldn't be, buyer beware kind of, but I guess some people do need some protection.
I agree. Okay, does anybody have any other questions? I want to make sure all questions were answered. We did, we did have one more question. Let's go over this real quick. And this is going to be an anonymous, we're going to keep this person anonymous. It says, I have a self-directed Roth IRA with TD Ameritrade. I have a company, bit IRA, presenting me with a Bitcoin IRA option. Also, I have another company with a self-directed LLC banking IRA that links my LLC, business checking, and IRA. So I can just run my business and investments directly out of my self-directed IRA. My LLC mostly does investment real estate and other investments, and I have a relatively large crypto footprint along with stocks, options, and Forex. This guy's really using his IRA to the max. And now for the question, Carl, can I combine all this under an LLC checking IRA? And what do you recommend?
Well, the first thing I'm not 100% sure of everything that's in there. When he says he's got a self-directed LLC banking IRA, is that a checkbook IRA already that somebody created that links my LLC? So does he have an LLC separate, a personal owned LLC? That's one question I have. And when he talks about business checking, is that the checkbook IRA and his business LLC checking combined? That's a no-no. I think you've lost your the corporate veil from asset protection. If it's done right, you can put several IRAs under one checkbook LLC, the way the laws are today, and you can buy Bitcoin with that out of your checkbook LLC today. You can buy stocks and bonds out of that checkbook LLC today. You can't pay yourself, business earnings out of that checkbook LLC. So if you've got a separate business, you got to keep those separate in most cases, unless you made a partnership between the two. So there's a lot of questions that I think need to be worked there. And if you did do it and you're running a business out of your checkbook LLC IRA, then you should be paying unrelated business income taxes on everything that you want, which is going to put you at 40%. If you're already making over $650,000 and you want to have money going into a Roth IRA, I would say that yes, you can probably do a lot of this under one checkbook IRA. But again, I would definitely not open up this checkbook IRA until I see what happens in this bill. And if you want, give me a call. I'd like to talk to you offline and see exactly, answer some of these questions and talk to you and make sure there's no prohibited transactions going on with the way it's set up right now.
Very good. Thank you for that. But before we close out, I'd like to take a few minutes and tell you about the upcoming academy. We've pushed it back a little bit to November. I was having too much fun in the summer and didn't want it to end. But I am excited to tell you that we are having, it's going to be a 2-day virtual event. And this is because of the responses of our surveys. People actually preferred the virtual, saves them on airfare and hotels, and they love being able to work from home and leave all their materials out and that kind of thing. And they also suggested that we cut it back to 2 days instead of 4. So I've made a really special offer for you. What we're doing is I'm cutting down the class time to 2 days, but I'm extending the easy as 1, 2, 3 coaching. And I'm thinking that's going to be way better than what you've had in the past. So Matthew, if you will show my screen, is it already up or?
Yep, I've got it up.
Perfect. Okay, so it will be 2 days. It will be November 13th and 14th. It is like unlike anything I've ever done. This is going to be hands-on interactive learning. We did some of that last year, but this is going to be much more of it. And you're going to learn by reviewing deals and creating quotes. So I'll have breakout sessions, and you can work assignments in small groups. We're going to go through like 10 different deals, and then you can break out into your groups and you can evaluate them and prepare the quotes, and we'll go over them together online. And you will be able to watch my thought process as I analyze the note deals. And honestly, I think that's the best way to learn. So, I mean, I can teach you what are the key points on how to evaluate a note, but there's nothing like seeing it in action where you go, oh my gosh, this note's financed 100%. And you start thinking, why would I want to buy that? You know, so it really helps you to learn if you can see deals and actually make decisions. You'll also learn my actual note pricing. How do I determine what I'm going to offer? So you'll learn that. Sunday morning, I'm going to walk you through a complete note flip. What does that mean? It means that you're going to learn start to finish how to flip a note. And that includes marketing for the note. Well, actually, we're going to do the marketing at a webinar next week. So that's one of our pre-academy webinars. But I will show you how to evaluate the note, how to prepare your quote, how to get it under contract. I will show you about ordering the appraisal, setting up the title, all of your paperwork, getting your investor lined up. We will go through the entire flip, and you'll see all the documents and how the whole thing transpires. Many people have asked for that. I've done it in the past, and it was extremely helpful so that people could see the entire picture. Sunday afternoon, we're going to study my exclusive alternative to a partial purchase. I know some of you have heard me talk about this, and there's a misconception about it. After talking with various SEC attorneys, particularly here in Ohio, Ohio does not like the partial purchase agreement because, just as Carl was mentioning, they don't like for two parties to hold a note at one time, particularly. Well, let's just leave it at that. And so I've spent a lot of time in talking to multiple attorneys, and I developed an option agreement that is a great alternative to the partial purchase. Now, I had some emails from people saying, oh, great, I do options all the time. I'll just have an option. I'll buy a note and give them an option to buy the tail end back. Please do not do that. It's not that simple. I really spent probably like 2 months going through and analyzing every clause. There are certain things that need to be in that agreement because it'll be deemed a security otherwise. And so I'll explain all of that on Sunday afternoon, but please don't just go willy-nilly and get an option agreement and try to do it. You could wind up in trouble and be sorry. So this is 2 days of hands-on training. It will empower you to close more note deals, to make quick cash, and to build a financial legacy. And like I mentioned before, everything that I teach can be done in your self-directed IRA. So that is so important when you're wanting to build a financial legacy or build your retirement. And you can do all of this from the comfort and safety of your own home. So you can register now at thenotebuyerzacademy.com. The early bird price is only $9.97, so you save $300. Not only are you going to get the 2 days of coaching, but you're going to get 6 months of my easy as 1, 2, 3 coaching. That's twice as much coaching. So I did half as many days, but twice as much coaching. And I think that's going to be a winning combination for you and help you to really have more time to close deals and get hands-on learning. The way the easy as 1, 2, 3 coaching works is that you follow the marketing, which, like I said, I'll be teaching at next week's webinar. And that will be on Tuesday night instead of Thursday, by the way. Watch your emails. But do your marketing. When you find a note, that's when your coaching is actually going to start. You submit that to me, and that's when I spring into action. I evaluate the note, I prepare a quote, I write it all out so you can see my thought process. You deliver the quote to the investor. And again, it's written out. There's no guesswork. I tell you exactly what you need to say. And then when the deal is accepted, you let me know and I prepare all of the documents, the agreement and everything you need. Basically, you will be a liaison with the note seller and I will do all of the back end of it. I will order the appraisal and the title. I orchestrate the closing. We use my investors, so you don't even have to worry about getting investors. And when we close the deal, we split the profits 50-50. It is an awesome way to learn. I think it's the best way to learn because when you've got money on the table that you're going to make, boy, do you learn a lot quicker than just watching a webinar. So it's a great combination. So you'll have 6 months of the easy as 1, 2, 3 coaching. And the 6 months starts the day after the academy. Now, if you are a new student and you don't have my master guide, you will need that. So you can add that for only $9.97 as well. So you get a bundle price of the Note Buyer's Master Guide system plus the 2-day academy and 6 months of coaching, and you get that all for only $19.94. Or if you've already got my system, then you'll just do the academy and 6 months of coaching for only $9.97. And so you can register now at notebuyerzacademy.com. Take advantage of it so you get the early bird savings of $300. And also, I'm going to do the same thing I did last week, and that is that if you order by noon on Saturday, I will even throw in my negotiating class. I think it's about 10 hours of audio classes on negotiating, and they are awesome, and they will help you out tremendously, not just with your note buying, with everyday life, negotiating with your spouse and your children, although you shouldn't negotiate with kids. But anyway, so if you register by noon on Saturday, I will also include my negotiating course. I hope that you will be able to come to the academy. I think this is going to be awesome. People really enjoyed the hands-on portion of last year's, and they loved having the breakout sessions. Carl is going to be with us on Saturday evening of the academy, and he's got some special things that he is going to share on things that you can do with your IRAs. So that will be an awesome thing as well. And I should mention too, Friday night is when it really begins. We're just going to have a welcome and a networking on Friday evening. The actual classes will be all day Saturday. Then Saturday evening will be Carl, and then also the classes on Sunday. So I hope you'll be able to join me. I think it's going to be an awesome academy. Okay, so if you, I need to get back to where I can see some people, please, Matthew. Carl, I want to thank you for tonight. You are always such a pleasure to have on. You are a wealth of information. And quite frankly, when it comes to IRAs, I don't know what I'd do without you. You're definitely my go-to guy when it comes to IRA information, that's for sure.
I appreciate that, Donna, and I love working with you guys as well.
Thank you. Do you have any closing comments, Carl?
I would just recommend that, look at this bill, think of what you think you like, and then get a hold of your representatives and also, the people, the leaders of the bill and the people on the House and Ways Committee, and just tell them you don't want certain things or you don't want a lot of these things. Like I said before, I personally don't like people limiting my choices, but I'm going to live within the law and see what happens. But if we have a chance to change it, now is when that you've got to take action to do that.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said. Mark, thank you for your contributions tonight. Always enjoy having you on. And thank you all for being with us tonight. It was great to see your smiling faces. And I hope you can make it to the academy. And I did mention Next week's pre-academy webinar will be on marketing for notes, and that will actually be on Tuesday night instead of Thursday. Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern time, and Matthew will be sending out an email announcement. Also, we are recording this, so Matthew will send out a link for tonight's webinar so that if you want to replay it, feel free to do that. Okay, I think that concludes everything. Thank you all. It was awesome to be with you again. Have a great night and see you next Tuesday.
Yeah, and if I didn't answer anybody's questions, have them call the office at Camaplan and we'll get their answers.
All
I
right,
think
yeah,
we
I'll
got
let you know.
everything.
Cool.
Thank you for that. Thank you. And I believe they have your number, or do you want to give it real quick?
215-283-2868, 215-283-2868, camaplan.com.
Perfect.
And look forward to talking to anybody.
And Matthew, thank you for handling all the technical part of this. I don't know where I'd be without you either. So,
My
okay.
pleasure.
Good night, everybody. God bless.
Thank you.